We're counting down 17 vintage mountain bikes quietly worth a fortune. Between 1977 and the early 90s, welders in California basements accidentally invented an entire sport, and collectors now pay 5 and 6 figures for the proof. One sold for $30,000, another cost $750 new, and now sits in a private collection. Which one climbs to the top? Stick around for the one that started it all. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Let's start with number 17. And number 17, we have the original Schwinn clunkers. In the mid-1970s, riders in Marin County, California, grabbed heavy 1930s and 40s Schwinn cruisers, mostly Excelsior models, for downhill racing on Mount Tamalpais. Regular cruisers weren't built for that punishment. Coaster brakes cooked themselves solid on every descent. Riders welded on fork braces to stop the forks folding and fitted 2.125-inch balloon tires for grip. These machines raced at the legendary Repack downhill starting in 1976. Timed runs down a 1,300-foot fire road that riders like Gary Fisher and Charlie Kelly turned into folklore. A complete clunker in good condition today can bring $5,000 to $15,000 simply because it's where the sport begins. That improvised approach had a hard ceiling, though, and one rider decided to build something from scratch instead. At number 16, it's the Muddy Fox Courier. In 1983, British importer Michael Kemp built the Courier into Britain's first mass-produced mountain bike. British riders had nothing purpose-built for the terrain. They were adapting road and BMX frames that buckled under real trail use. The Courier used a chromoly frame with a slacker head angle for stability, wider off-road tires, and thumb shifters borrowed from touring bikes. It sold well enough to kickstart the UK mountain bike market and appeared in early British cycling magazines as proof the trend wasn't just an American fad. Restored Couriers now trade among UK collectors for several £100s, prized as the bike that opened the category overseas. That same spark was happening independently across the Atlantic in Italy. Coming in at number 15, the Senelli Rampino. Released in 1985, it became Italy's first true mountain bike, built by one of cycling's most respected road frame makers. Senelli needed to prove Italian craftsmanship could handle dirt, not just pavement, at a time when mountain bikes were seen as a purely American invention. The Rampino used lugged chromoly construction with relaxed geometry and cantilever brakes, built with the same precision Senelli applied to its road frames. It won over European riders and is still referenced by Italian cycling historians as the bike that legitimized off-road riding in Europe. Clean originals now command 4 figures among European collectors, chasing the birth of their own scene. Back in the US, smaller builders were racing to answer a different question. How do you make these bikes for everyone, not just custom order buyers? Number 14 brings us the Univega Alpina Pro. Released in the early 1980s, it was one of the first mountain bikes widely available through mainstream American bike shops rather than small specialty builders. Riders wanted off-road capability without paying custom frame prices or waiting months for a build. Univega answered with a chromoly frame, cantilever brakes, and a wide-range gear cluster adapted from touring bikes, priced to compete directly with early Stumpjumpers. Vintage bike magazines praised its value, and it became a gateway bike for thousands of first-time off-road riders. Today, it's a favorite among budget collectors, often changing hands for $300 to $600 in original condition. But shops wanted more than an import. They wanted a truly local bike, built in the birthplace of the sport itself. Sitting at number 13, Marin's Team Marin and Pine Mountain models, built through the mid-1980s in the county where mountain biking began. These bikes carried the sport's hometown pedigree directly into showrooms. Local shops needed a bike reflecting Marin's racing heritage, not just a generic import. Marin used double-butted chromoly tubing, 69-degree head angles for confident descending, and componentry pulled straight from the racing scene at Repack and beyond. These bikes turned up in local Norba race results throughout the decade, ridden by shop owners and weekend racers alike. Marin badged bikes from this era now sell in the $800 to $1,500 range, valued as much for the name as the frame. Meanwhile, a small outfit in Southern California was quietly building some of the most sought-after race frames of the decade. That's number 13 down, 12 to go, and we're only getting started. If you're into the stories behind these machines, subscribing means you'll catch every deep dive we drop. Let's keep going. Up next at number 12, the Mantis XCR. Built by Richard Cunningham starting in the mid-1980s, the XCR became a favorite among serious Southern California racers, chasing an edge over mass-produced frames. Off-the-shelf geometry wasn't cutting it for riders pushing early cross-country racing. Cunningham hand-built frames with tighter, race-specific angles and lighter chromoly tubing than most production bikes offered, often under 24 pounds complete. XCRs showed up on podiums at regional Norba races through the late 80s, building a reputation as a serious racer's bike rather than a shop floor model. Because production numbers were tiny, surviving XCRs now fetch $2,000 or more from collectors chasing early American race pedigree. Frame builders like Cunningham were proving custom geometry mattered, and bigger companies were watching closely. Number 11 takes us to the Trek 850. Launched in 1983, it was Trek's first mountain bike and the model that pulled the young Wisconsin company into the off-road boom. Trek had built its name on road bikes and needed a credible entry into cycling's fastest growing before competitors locked up the market. The 850 used a chromoly frame, a rigid unicrown fork, and a wide-range 15-speed drivetrain, priced under $300 to undercut boutique competitors. It sold in large enough numbers to become one of the best-selling mountain bikes of the mid-1980s, introducing a generation to the trail. Well-preserved 850s now sell for $200 to $500, valued as the affordable on-ramp that helped mountain biking go mainstream. Out west, another company was betting everything on a single trail range. At number 10, we've got the GT Karakoram and Timberline. Introduced in the mid-1980s, these became GT's flagship mid-tier mountain bikes as the Southern California BMX company pushed hard into off-road. GT had BMX racing credibility but needed a mountain bike serious enough to be taken seriously by trail riders. GT brought over triple triangle frame construction from its BMX line for extra rear-end stiffness, paired with chromoly tubing and increasingly capable component groups each model year. The triple triangle design became a GT signature, instantly recognizable in race photos and catalogs through the rest of the decade. Original triple triangle GT, in solid shape, now trade in the $400 to $900 range among riders who grew up wanting one. But one small Japanese-influenced brand was about to rewrite what thoughtful design meant for mountain bikes. Coming in at number 9, the Bridgestone MB1. Released in 1989 and shaped by designer Grant Peterson, the MB1 became Bridgestone USA's top-tier mountain bike and a cult favorite almost overnight. Peterson felt the industry was chasing trends instead of building bikes that rode well and lasted, and set out to prove restraint could beat flash. The MB1 used TIG, welded chromoly tubing, conservative geometry for confident all-day riding, and componentry chosen for durability over marketing appeal. Bicycling Magazine and other outlets repeatedly praised it as one of the best riding mountain bikes money could buy, cementing a loyal following. Clean MB1s now sell for well over $1,000, chased by riders who still swear by Peterson's design philosophy. Meanwhile, a California company was about to make the very idea of mass-produced historic. Number 8 belongs to the specialized Stumpjumper. Debuting in November 1981, it became the world's first mass-produced mountain bike, with the first batch of about 250 frames arriving from Japan. Until then, a real mountain bike meant a custom order and a long wait from a handful of builders. Specialized answered with a welded chromoly frame, a 15-speed Sun Tour ARX GT drivetrain, and Mafak cantilever brakes, weighing just under 30 pounds and selling complete for $750. The first run sold out almost immediately, and the Stumpjumper is now preserved in the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. Rideable original 1981 examples now regularly sell for well over $1,000, decades removed from that original price tag. Specialized had proven mountain bikes could scale, and Cannondale was determined to prove they could be built from a completely different material. Landing at number 7, the Cannondale SM800. Launched in 1983, it became one of the first mass-produced mountain bikes built from aluminum instead of steel. Steel frames were reliable but heavy, and Cannondale believed aluminum could deliver a stiffer, lighter ride if the welding was done right. Cannondale used oversized aluminum tubing, a departure from anything else on the trail, built at their own Bedford, Pennsylvania plant rather than outsourced overseas. The SM800's stiff, distinctive ride made it stand out in magazine tests and helped establish Cannondale's reputation for oversized aluminum years before it became an industry standard. Surviving SM800s now sell in the $600 to $1,200 range, sought after as the bike that made aluminum mainstream. One aerospace-obsessed builder in California was about to push that same material even further. Number 6 goes to the Klein Attitude. Built through the mid to late 1980s by Gary Klein, a former MIT aerospace engineering student, the Attitude became one of the most technically advanced mountain bikes of its decade. Klein believed bicycle frames were decades behind aerospace tubing technology and set out to prove it with his own designs. He used large diameter, precision-welded aluminum tubing and bold, factory-sprayed paint finishes unlike anything else on shop floors, shaving weight while adding stiffness most steel frames couldn't match. Klein's bikes became instantly recognizable in race photos for their color, and the brand became the one serious riders lusted after, even if they couldn't afford one. Mint Klein frames from this era now sell for $1,500 to $3,000 among collectors chasing that unmistakable paint. In Colorado, a small startup was about to build the bike pure racers actually wanted underneath them. At number 5, we have the Yeti FRO and ARC. Built through the late 1980s and early 1990s by John Parker's Yeti cycles, these became two of the most race-proven mountain bikes of the era. Elite racers needed frames stiff enough to survive World Cup-level abuse without flexing away watts on climbs. Yeti used lightweight, precisely butted chromoly, and later aluminum tubing with tight, aggressive racing geometry, tuned around top professional riders' feedback. Yeti-sponsored racers stood on World Cup and Norba national podiums throughout this period, turning the brand into a symbol of serious racing pedigree almost overnight. Original Yeti frames from this window now regularly sell for $2,000 and up, treated by collectors as functional race history. The single most obsessed over cult bike of the decade was still to come. Coming in at number 4, the Fat Chance Yo Eddy. Released in 1988 by frame builder Chris Chance, the Yo Eddy became one of the most fiercely loved mountain bikes of its generation, almost the moment it hit shops. Chance wanted a frame with playful, responsive handling for technical single-track, not just straight-line speed on fire roads. He used tight, precisely mitered chromoly tubing and a shorter wheelbase than most competitors, tuned to feel lively and flickable on tight trails. Mountain bike magazines repeatedly singled it out as one of the best handling frames money could buy, and demand regularly outstripped Chance's small batch production. Original Yo Eddys now sell for $1,500 to well over $3,000, depending on condition. Rarer still were the frames built by two brothers who barely sold to the public at all. Number 3 is held by Cook Brothers Racing Frames. Built through the early to mid-1980s by Randy and Randall Cook out of Santa Fe Springs, California, these started as BMX components before crossing into some of the rarest early mountain bike frames in existence. Serious off-road racers needed lighter, stronger parts than mass-market suppliers offered, and the Cook brothers had already built that reputation in BMX. They machined finely engineered aluminum components and built small runs of mountain bike frames using techniques borrowed from BMX racing, prioritizing strength to weight over mass production. Cook brothers parts turned up on winning bikes at regional races throughout the era, earning near mythical status among riders who could get their hands on a set. Because so few frames were built, complete Cook brothers mountain bikes now sell for $4,000 to $8,000 when they surface at all. 2 spots remain, and they belong to the men who arguably started the whole industry. At number 2, it's the Ritchey mountain bike. Built starting in 1979 by frame builder Tom Ritchey and sold through Gary Fisher and Charlie Kelly's new company, Mountain Bikes. This was the first bike sold specifically under the mountain bike name. Riders who'd outgrown converted clunkers wanted a bike engineered from the ground up for racing off-road, not repurposed from a cruiser. Ritchey hand-brazed chromoly frames with geometry refined from repack race feedback, built one at a time in his Palo Alto shop, and sold complete through Fisher and Kelly's mail-order operation. These bikes dominated early Norba-era races through the early 1980s and are widely credited by historians as the machines that turned mountain biking from a Marin County curiosity into a national movement. Surviving originals now sell for well over $10,000, treated as the literal birth certificate of the modern mountain bike industry. Which brings us to the one bike that beat them all to it by 2 full years. And at number 1, the Breezer Series 1. Hand-built by Joe Breeze in 1977, it's widely recognized as the first bicycle frame ever purpose-built for mountain biking, with only 10 ever made. Before this, every off-road rider was modifying old cruisers that weren't engineered to survive the abuse of downhill racing. Breeze used straight-gauge chromoly aircraft tubing with a 67.5-degree head angle for stable descending, nickel-plated the frames as his signature, and repurposed motorcycle handlebars and brake levers because no bicycle parts existed strong enough. Breeze rode Breezer No. 1 to victory at the Repack Downhill on its very first run in October 1977, and one of the 10 originals later sold privately for around $30,000. 3 of the 10 now live in museums, including the Smithsonian, the Mountain Bike Hall of Fame, and Japan's Shimano Museum. It isn't just the most valuable bike on this list, it's the bike every other one on this list exists because of. From a cobbled-together Schwinn cruiser flying down a fire road in 1976 to a museum piece frame worth $30,000, this countdown has traced the entire birth of an industry in under 15 years. What's wild is that almost none of these builders set out to create a global sport. They just wanted a bike tough enough to survive their own trail. That scrappy, solve-it-yourself energy is exactly why collectors chase these frames today. They're not just old bikes, they're the paper trail of a sport, figuring itself out in real time. If you want more deep dives like this, subscribe. The next one might feature a bike you owned as a kid. Which one on this list would you love to find in your garage? Let us know below.